High on a rugged mountain, where winds whispered through ancient pines and mist clung to jagged peaks, an old sage lived in a modest hut. His body was frail, weathered by time, but his eyes held the spark of wisdom earned through countless seasons. Beside him was his young disciple, a youth with a heart full of devotion but a mind still untested by the ways of the world. Their days were simple, filled with quiet lessons under the vast sky, until one fateful morning when the sage fell gravely ill. The disciple, alarmed by the sage's weakening breaths, knew they could no longer remain on the mountain. The nearest village, nestled far below in a valley, held the promise of a healer who could mend the sage's failing body. Without hesitation, the disciple hoisted the old man onto his back, securing him with care, and began the descent as dawn painted the horizon in hues of gold. The path was steep, winding through rocky trails and dense thickets, each step a test of endurance. The sun climbed higher, and the disciple's legs burned with effort. His shoulders ached under the sage's weight, but his resolve held firm. Along the way, they passed travelers, merchants with laden carts, wanderers with weathered cloaks, and farmers with calloused hands. Each time, the disciple paused to ask how far the village lay. Every answer was the same: just a short distance more. Heartened by these words, the disciple pressed on, his steps quickening with hope. Hours passed, and the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the path. The disciple's strength waned, his breaths growing ragged. Yet the village remained elusive, hidden beyond the next bend or hill. He asked again, meeting the eyes of a passing herder, then a woman carrying a basket of herbs. Their replies echoed the others. Only a short distance remained. The disciple nodded, clinging to their words, though doubt began to creep into his heart. Night fell, cloaking the world in darkness. The disciple's body screamed for rest, his muscles trembling under the sage's weight. The path seemed endless, each step heavier than the last. He stopped to ask another traveler, a lone figure illuminated by the faint glow of a lantern. The answer was unchanged: a short distance more. But now the words felt hollow. The disciple's hope flickered, replaced by frustration. He had asked countless times, walked countless steps, yet the village was nowhere in sight. Exhausted and disheartened, the disciple stumbled to a halt beneath a gnarled tree. He gently lowered the sage to the ground, his chest heaving with exertion. The weight of failure pressed upon him. He gazed at the sage, whose face remained serene despite his frail state, and let out a heavy sigh. They had traveled from dawn to the depths of night, yet the village seemed as distant as ever. Despair took root, and the disciple sank to the ground, unwilling to take another step. The journey felt futile, the promises of a short distance mocking his efforts. The sage, though weak, stirred. His eyes, bright with understanding, met the disciple's weary gaze. With a gentle gesture, he urged the young man to continue. The village, he assured, was near, just a short distance more. The disciple hesitated, his spirit battered, but the sage's calm certainty stirred something within him. Trusting his master, he lifted the old man once more and resumed their trek, each step a battle against his own doubt. As midnight approached, a faint glow appeared in the distance. The disciple's heart leaped. The village emerged from the darkness, its cluster of homes a beacon of hope. They had arrived. A kind villager welcomed them, offering shelter and warmth. The disciple, relieved beyond measure, ensured the sage was settled comfortably before the healer was summoned. Only then did he allow himself to rest, his body aching but his spirit lifted by their success. In the quiet of the villager's home, as the sage rested, the disciple's mind churned with questions. He turned to his master, his voice heavy with confusion. Why had every traveler claimed the village was just a short distance away when the journey had been so long and grueling? The sage's lips curved into a faint smile, his eyes glinting with insight. He explained that the travelers they met were kind souls, each offering words not of truth but of encouragement. They knew the path was long, the journey arduous, yet they chose to speak hope, to kindle strength in a weary traveler's heart. Their gentle lies were gifts, meant to keep the disciple moving forward when despair threatened to halt him. The disciple listened, his exhaustion giving way to clarity. He saw the wisdom in the sage's words, the beauty in the traveler's kindness. They had not deceived him out of malice, but had woven a thread of hope to guide him through the darkness. Their words, though not precise, had carried him to his destination. In that moment, understanding bloomed within him. The truth, he realized, was not always the greatest need. Sometimes a spark of encouragement, even if dressed in falsehood, could light the way through the hardest trials. The sage's health slowly mended under the healer's care, and the disciple remained by his side, reflecting on their journey. He thought of the travelers, strangers who had unknowingly shaped his path with their words. He saw himself not just as a disciple, but as someone who could also offer such kindness. The lesson settled deep within him. In life, the weight of truth could sometimes crush a struggling soul, but words of hope, however small, could lift them toward their goal. From that day forward, the disciple carried this truth in his heart. He became a beacon of encouragement, offering words that uplifted others, even when the road ahead was daunting. He learned that the power of inspiration could transform a moment of weakness into one of triumph. The journey down the mountain had not only saved his master, but had reshaped his understanding of compassion. He vowed to be a voice of hope, knowing that such words, however simple, could carry someone through their darkest hours to the light of their destination.